We have an area right here where I live. Matter of fact, where those two Bigfoot hunters died, that's only about 30 miles from my house. And I know right where they're at. And I even went down there a couple days later and looked at the area and stuff. And that whole thing didn't even make any sense. I mean, what they did, nobody would have done in their right mind. These guys just didn't die. Two people don't die together from hypothermia. I mean, even the Indians growing up, the Yakima Indians, they told us, man, us boys, you stay out of there. Yeah, there's one area in there. I don't want to tell you the area because I don't want people going in there. You know, they just need to stay out of there. They won't even go in there because they call that Skookum Valley in there. Now, I've met so many people here in my community that come up and said, hey, you're a Bigfoot researcher, huh? And I said, no, I'm not. And they're like, well, you go out looking for Bigfoot? And I said, yeah, I go out with the groups. I fly drones. I go out on walks. I help them cast prints, whatever they need. I just go out and help them. I'm not a researcher. I'm just a helper. You know, I just kind of go along for security and, you know, just make sure everybody's safe and, you know, just do what I can. Matter of fact, there's a story I wanted to tell you. I didn't know this until Thanksgiving of this year, but I have a cousin that lives in Hood River, Oregon, just north of Mount Hood. And I went over there and come to find out his wife and her mother had a Class A sighting up behind Hood River on Mount Hood. They were delivering papers late at night, and they said that they just put the paper in the mailbox and shut it. And one of them walked out of the road, out of the trees, up onto the road, stopped, looked at him, and continued across the road and went up the hill into the trees and was gone. And her mom told me the same story right there on the spot. And I was like, oh. And they said, we never delivered papers at night again in there. Yeah, it scared them pretty bad.
I've already started the conversation with Henry. Henry, thanks for joining me on Bigfoot Crossroads. I just want to keep the conversation going, and let me start off with this question just based off what you just said. What do you think the deal is with that, with like Bigfoot doing things like that whenever they cross roads in front of cars or whenever they just walk out like that? Everybody knows that you spend a tremendous amount of time trying to find these things and trying to have a sighting. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have spent countless hours trying to see one. We know how elusive they are and how good they are at what they do. But then you have these situations like this where they just like act like they don't even care and they just like walk out in front of a car. What do you think's going on with that?
I think they're just trying to get from point A to point B. And they know what cars are. They know who we are. I think they're comfortable with people. I mean, it was a residential area, so I had to walk through there. And I just think they're going from wherever they're going. They just didn't care. You know, I just come out, looked at them, and crossed the road and went on up the hill.
That's how it always kind of came across to me. Like, there's just certain ones that just seem to they don't care in certain situations.
Yeah, but I think it's the older ones, the older ones that know that you're not there to hurt them. I think the younger ones are the ones that are more mischievous and may get shot at more. I think they take more chances than the older ones do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an area right here where I live. Matter of fact, where those two Bigfoot hunters died.
Yeah.
That's only about 30 miles from my house. And I know right where they're at. And I even went down there a couple days later and looked at the area and stuff. And that whole thing didn't even make any sense. I mean, what they did, nobody would have done in their right mind. But that whole area down in there, I mean, even the Indians growing up, the Yakima Indians, they told us, man, us boys, you stay out of there. They won't even go in there because they call that Skookum Valley in there.
So that's an area that they consider is pretty dangerous.
It is. Yeah, there's one area in there. I don't want to tell you the area because I don't want people going in there. They just need to stay out of there. But right where these two guys were at, as soon as I heard that story, me and everybody that lives here, we were like, this is BS. No, these guys just didn't die. Two people don't die together from hypothermia. I mean, one might go down, but the other one will go for help,
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
At the time, this was back around, Christmas Eve.
No, Christmas Eve this year or last year.
They didn't come home for Christmas, and their families alerted the authorities, and there was, a search for them, and they found their bodies. And of course, it was all over the news. Bigfoot hunters found dead. What's the deal, man? Was the weather just that terrible?
No, the weather wasn't that bad. No, our weather here wasn't death-defying. Everybody here says that. This is crazy. This was not. It rained for 2 weeks straight. So the creeks and the little rivers, they're kind of in flood stage at that point. They went up into this area, and they weren't that far off the main road. And there was another road that turned, and it makes a big loop up in this valley, and it comes back out by the campground. And so they had pulled off right there. They were paralleling another road, and for some reason, they crossed a creek, and they weren't dressed to cross the creek. I mean, they were not dressed for winter to start with. So why a 59-year-old man and a 37-year-old man would cross that creek is beyond any of us. We can't figure out why they did that.
They crossed the creek going away from their vehicle.
Yes, they were moving away from their vehicle. They were found 2 miles away from their vehicle, and they were 700 feet apart, deceased. So that doesn't happen. I could have crawled to my car for 2 miles soaking wet. I would have made it back.
Yeah, if it means life or death, absolutely.
Absolutely. I would have crossed that creek again and made it to my vehicle. Wet or not, I wouldn't have stopped moving. But so anyway, once they crossed the creek, they moved further away. They went through a bunch of blowdown and deadfall. You had to either go under it or over it to get through it. And they went through a bunch of it. So that doesn't make any sense either. Nobody does that.
No.
So once they got to the base of the hill, they moved up the hill. It's like a little ridge up there. Once they got up on top of the ridge, they separated. For some reason, they separated. One went north, one went south. So the one that went south, a friend of mine on the SAR team recovered that body. He went down the ridge south a little ways, and then he tried to cut back down to the creek, and he was found in extremely brushy area. They actually had to pull his body back up the hill to get him out of there. That's how brushy it was. It was that bad.
Wow.
The other guy went up the ridge and kind of crossed down like he was trying to get back to, and he was kind of found in the same way. So they actually had to get power saws and cut their way out through all the deadfall because they couldn't get them out. I mean, this is how tangled up it was in there. So they actually had to cut a trail out of there to get them out. And then another weird thing is a Coast Guard helicopter out of Astoria, Oregon, which is 120 miles away, showed up, and they took the bodies out. So that's kind of bizarre, but I don't know why they got involved. But
I mean, especially out of there, I mean, I would think there was closer options.
Oh yeah. I mean, we have hospitals at White Salmon, Hood River. I mean, the guys were deceased. I mean, it's not like it was life, threatening situation, but anyway, the helicopter pulled the bodies out, and that's the last we've ever heard of anything. So, and I kept saying that to the guys, you're never going to hear nothing about this. So I don't know. These two guys were from Portland, Oregon, and I heard they work for FedEx. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But either way, this whole thing is just bizarre to where they were at. They shouldn't have been in there to start with. But.
Well, I mean, like you and I were, we talked about a little bit about this, on the phone previously. No reason to cross the creek. Everybody takes the path of least resistance. There's no reason for them to navigate that deadfall and then to go uphill, separate from one another, and then loop back around. I mean, the behavior to me and I'm just speculating, but the behavior seems like we're missing a factor in this scenario. There's something else going on.
Yep. There was something major going on to make them move away from their vehicle like that. Nobody in their right mind would have done that. Nobody in their right mind would have crossed that creek. Because it was, like I said, it was kind of in flood stage, and they were wet from that point on, man. So that's kind of where you can kind of see where this whole thing is going at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, again, dying from the elements like that, 700 feet apart. I mean, again, that's just so weird, man. I understand, like, maybe something happens to one person and then the other one goes and gets help, gets back to the road.
Exactly. Yep. That's what we've all said too. It's like, why? That's not what happens in a situation like this. You just said it. When one person goes down, the other person will go for help and come back. And they're only 2 miles away. You may have to cross the creek again, but you're not going to die if you keep moving.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's bizarre. It's extremely bizarre of what happened in there. So, and we did have a little skiff of snow on the ground, but it was all slushy stuff. It wasn't, it wasn't bad weather, It just doesn't make any sense what happened in there.
Yeah, really weird. Especially considering the lore of the area in general and everything, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Kind of bizarre for sure. So how old were you the first time you heard about Bigfoot?
I was about 8 years old.
Wow.
Well, I was kind of coming to that age where I was able to go out with my grandpas and my dad. They do a lot of elk hunting and deer hunting and stuff like that. I was kind of getting to that age. I got my hunter safety card at 10. So about 8 years old, they started taking me out to elk camps and stuff. And that was kind of my first go around with that.
Was it just overhearing stories, or did they talk to you directly about it?
Yeah, just stories. Just telling, stories of what happened. And I'll tell you this one story. I grew up in Carson, Washington. That's in Skamania County. So this would be about 1976, 75, somewhere in there. I was about 8 years old or so. My grandpa, he contracted through the Forest Service when they were building trails and putting trails in all over in Washington State. And then he had horses and mules. He would haul in, as they were building these trails, he would haul in all the equipment for the Forest Service or whoever was building the trails. And then he would travel a lot of the trails in the springtime, just cutting trees out of the way, for hikers and just clearing trails, and he had a cabin up on the Lewis River. We used to take off. Me and Dad would go from Carson and we'd go up over Paradise Creek, and then we'd go into Swift Creek Reservoir. And as soon as we crossed the river there, the Lewis River, we would take a right and go up the river there. And I'm not sure where that cabin's at. I've tried to find it over the years, but I just can't. I don't know where it's at. I can't find it. But
lost to time.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'm not even sure if it's still there. It should be, but I just don't know where it's at. I can't find it. But we were up there, and we would spend about 10 to 14 days with Grandpa. And this had to have been in August, because I remember coming back. I was home for about a week, and then I'd be back in school. So this had to have been like around the third week of August or so that we would go up there. And well, Grandpa, he had that cabin up there, and so me and Dad would show up, and we'd go ride horses and do whatever Grandpa and they wanted to do. And anyway, the Lewis River was only a couple hundred yards, if that, from the cabin. And I would go down to the river. I mean, times were different back then. They didn't really worry about us kids much back then.
Right.
There wasn't really much to worry about because, we just went and did our thing. But I'd go down to the river and I'd fish and swim and do whatever I wanted to do. And so I got back up to the cabin one day, and old Grandpa walked in. He was pretty mad. He was pretty upset. He was grumbling around, and you got to kind of understand my Grandpa. It was a different cut of man back then. He was an old logger from way back. He didn't take much from nobody. That's just the way they were back in the day. But So he walked in, and I'm just going to tell you the way it went down. But so Grandpa, he was grumbling around, and he was pretty peeved. And Dad said, "What's wrong with you?" And he didn't really say much at first. And Dad said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting the way you're acting?" And then he looked at Dad and he goes, "Them goddamn monkeys are back." And Dad's like, "What monkeys?" He goes, "You'll find out soon enough." And Dad's like, "There ain't no monkeys out here." And he said, "Yeah, you just wait. You're going to find out pretty quick." So anyway, Grandpa, he had an area for his horses that it was pretty good sized field out there. And anyway, right off the end of his cabin, he had some corrals built, and it looked like a big teardrop, like an oval shape, but it was pretty good size. And right at the window, he had a window in there, and his bed was right at that window, and he had a lever action rifle above that window right there. So he didn't have to get up or nothing. He could just roll over and look out. So he told Dad, he said, "Yeah, we're going to have to move all the horses and mules up into this corral for the next few weeks." He said, "In about a month, they'll be gone." And Dad's just like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, them damn monkeys, man. They come back this time of year every year. He said, "As soon as the fish are gone, they'll be gone." Well, him and Dad got into a big old argument, and pretty much Grandpa told him to shut his mouth, and he'll find out soon enough. So anyway, we went out and got the horses and mules and brought them up to the cabin there. And sure enough, that night we were just laying in the cabin, and all of a sudden, probably around 11 o'clock, the yelling started. It was like they were yelling back and forth to each other across the canyons. You could just hear them out there whooping and hollering, I guess. And Dad goes, "What in the hell is going on out here?" And Grandpa goes, "All them damn monkeys are out there just doing their thing, just chirping along." He said, "Give them an hour or so and they'll shut up." So anyway, that happened that night. And for the next 4 or 5 nights, you could hear them every night. For some reason, about the same time, they start hollering at each other. And then Grandpa told me, he said, "You don't leave this cabin until it's full daylight. And if you go down the river," he said, "if you see anything, you just come right back to the cabin." He said, "Don't run. Just walk back up here. Nothing will bother you. Just get back to the cabin and just stay in the cabin." So, but I never seen anything. I just went down and did my fishing and swimming and, riding horses and stuff. But at night, you can sure hear them yelling back and forth to each other.
And your grandpa clearly knew what they were.
Oh, he knew exactly what was going on because he knew. Oh, absolutely, he knew. Yeah, because if anything would have got, if the horses and stuff would have started rustling around or something, he'd have got that rifle off there and walked out there because he was not going to let anything happen to him. Yeah. He would have had a shootout right there, but he never did. No, not while I was there anyway. But he knew what the deal was. So, and then, when Grandpa said the monkeys are out, I'm thinking like the Indiana Jones spider monkeys, like the little bitty ones.
Yeah, of course.
I had no idea what he was talking about. And then back then I didn't know about salmon runs and stuff either. When he said the fish are gone, they'll be gone.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of learned that later on in life, but I didn't really know what he was talking about. But there was another situation we had. Dad and Grandpa were gold bugs. They were always looking for gold. Matter of fact, my dad had a gold mine when I was a kid. So they were always looking for the lost gold mine on the Lewis River. I don't know if there is or not. I never really paid attention to that, but
of course there is.
Oh yeah, there's always a gold mine lost somewhere. But anyway, they were always looking for the lost gold mine, the old Spaniard gold mine or whatever the hell they called that. But so anyway, Dad had a little jerry boat. It was a little aluminum boat. And this thing was light. I mean, the thing was about half dangerous to even get in. To tell you the truth, I can't believe we even used this thing. But so me, Dad, and Grandpa, we put it in the boat in the truck one day, and we went up. And I'm thinking it's at the lower falls on the Lewis Rivers where we were at, because the road. And I think I found this bench in there, but I think I know where it's at. But anyway, Yeah, I remember the Lower Falls. I'm pretty sure that's where we are at. Now there's a campground there, and I can't remember if there was a campground there or not when I was a kid. But anyway, we pulled over and we got this boat out, went down and put it in the water, and we crossed the Lewis River and was on the other side. And of course, Grandpa, he had his lever action with him. He always carried that rifle with him. And Dad, he had the old 44 John Wayne hammered, Western model pistols. But so we went down, and there was a creek that went up the hill there, and they were panning and looking around for some gold. And anyway, Dad says, well, I'm going to go on up the creek here a ways, and I'm going to check out some more up here and see if there's anything. So he went up there a ways, and then me and Grandpa kind of went up there panning along the way. And then all of a sudden, Dad, he hollered down to Grandpa. He's like, hey, come up here, and Grandpa didn't want to go. And he's like, no, you need to come up here. So anyway, Grandpa said, come on. So we walked up there, and it was probably a couple 100 yards up to where Dad was, but there was a bench into the hillside. If you look on a topographic map, you'll see it. But if you look at the forest map, you can't see it. But anyway, so we get up there to the top of the hill, and Dad says, hey, check this out. Well, Dad had found a bunch of bones and fish laying around, and he got to looking around in there, and all of a sudden he looked up, and there was these big nests in these trees. So they were built about 10 feet across. They were about 20 feet up in the trees, and they were right on the edge of this bench. And Dad, Grandpa's looking at it like, what is this? What's going on here? And Dad goes, I don't know, but it looks like a big bird's nest, a bunch of them. So anyway, Dad, he ended up climbing up into one of them. He got up there. He managed to get in there, and I can remember him looking over the side of this thing, telling Grandpa, I don't know, what is this? What would make this? And Grandpa's like, I don't know. But there was a bunch of them along that edge right there. I always thought they were kind of like a nest for laying in, but I don't think so anymore. And more I think about this, I think they were, whatever made them was up there sitting there watching that river. Dad said you could see the river from those things.
Huh.
So I think they were just kind of sitting up in there watching the river for some reason. But anyway, old Grandpa, he started getting nervous. I don't know if he's seen something, heard something or what, but he started getting on my dad about getting out of there. He goes, we got to go now. Just get out. And well, him and Grandpa got in a big argument, and because Dad wanted to stay there and look at him, and he said, no, we got to go now. Right now. Get out. So anyway, Dad, he finally got out of the tree, and we kind of walked out on this bench right on the edge a ways, and there was a bunch of them in there, but some of them looked dilapidated. Like half of them were they were falling down. Some looked newer. So Dad didn't want to go. Grandpa wanted to go, and they got into a big argument. Yeah, it was a pretty heated argument. But I think Grandpa knew what was going on. He just didn't want to say, because I don't think Dad would have believed him.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got out of there and went back down to the river and got in the boat and crossed back over. And that was Grandpa's doings there. He said, we're out of here. We're not messing around here no more. That's it.
So what were your thoughts on Bigfoot, like after that event, and then you go on and you live your life? Did you think about it? Did you continue to hear about it?
Oh yeah. Well, my grandpa on my mom's side, yeah, they had quite a run in with them, but I don't know if I really want to tell that story online. But anyway, yeah, things got pretty real for my grandpa on my mom's side. That was up in the Hoquiam area, Montesano. They were logging out there in the Olympics, and they ran into some stuff out there that got pretty wild. So, but yeah, and it wasn't just my grandpa. His two brothers was with him too, and they told me the same story. So I got three people telling me that individually, they all told me the same story. This had to happen in the 30s because my grandpa, he ended up in the Pacific War in World War II. He got drafted. He was pretty young when he come up here. He was from Des Moines, Iowa. Des Moines, I don't know how you say it. But yeah, him and his two brothers came up. Well, they had no work in the 30s, and they ended up logging up in here in Washington. So yeah, and they ended up out there in the Olympics around Montesano area, and things got pretty freaking wild out there, man. Like Yeah, they had armed guards guarding them and everything. So,
wow.
Yeah, things got pretty wild. But yeah, and then once my grandpa came back from World War II, he had a lot of friends killed over in there. So, as a matter of fact, he became a minister after World War II.
Wow.
So, yeah, I know he wouldn't lie about anything. And he would tell me these stories, and I'm like, oh, my God. And then I had my two uncles tell me the same thing individually, word for word. I mean, they were all together when all this happened. So, yeah, it was pretty wild, man.
So you knew just from the stories of your grandfather and your other family members that these things are real. They're out there. It's not just a myth.
Well, it just wasn't our family too. We had friends and stuff that talked about these things too. I mean, yeah, it's just a hot spot around here. And then in 2016, I had a sighting. I seen 2 of them.
What was that like?
Well, it scared the shit out of me for one.
Yeah.
I just wanted out of that situation. It caught me off guard because I always hunted alone. I always like to hunt alone. I was just out turkey hunting and I had one walk out in front of me, man. It was a male about 45 yards away. And it scared the shit out of me, man. I just wanted out, I just wanted out of the situation. And then another one walked out behind that one. So yeah, it was pretty wild. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I quit hunting over that for 3 years. I didn't hunt again until 2019. And that happened in the spring of 2016. And that was at Mount Adams. I was on the southeast side of Mount Adams.
And you were turkey hunting?
I was turkey hunting at that time, yep.
Were you like heavily camouflaged and all that?
Yeah, I built a blind. The week prior, I went in there and built a blind out of sticks. It was kind of a logged area in there. And the blind looked like a one-seat outhouse. The door opened from the back. And that whole sighting lasted for about 7 minutes. But visually, I only seen them for about 3 minutes. They kept ducking back into the brush and they would come back out.
If you don't mind, walk me through it.
Okay. Spring of 2016, I went up the week prior. I was on private property. I went in and I built a blind out of just limbs and sticks and just stuff laying on the ground. And I made it with baling wire and a pair of cutters, and actually it looked pretty good when I was done. But so anyway, I put a door on the back. Like I said, it looked like a single seat outhouse when I was done. And I had some extra limbs, but I just laid them up on top. I didn't need to, but for some reason, I just laid them up. I didn't tie them down or anything. So the next week I had backed out, went home, and I was pretty anxious to get up there. So I left a little early and it was pretty dark. And where I parked at, there was a landing right there, an old logging landing. And off to my left was about a 250-acre clear cut up on this hillside. It was all cut off. So I parked there. I got out, got my backpack on, got my shotgun out. I was loading it up. And I cleaned my shotgun the night before. And I forgot to put my plug back in because I put 4 rounds into it. And I thought, God damn it. If I get caught, I'm going to take it anyway. So I just put 6 rounds in, and this will come into play later on. But so I just put 6 rounds in it, and I was going to walk about 3/4 of a mile up the road was the second landing. And off that second landing, it dropped down a hill and it crossed a creek and it went up the other side. The road did, and it stopped. But off to the right-hand side of that, it's about 50 yards from the creek itself. There's a flat area right there, and there's an L-shaped meadow right there that I was going to hunt turkey in. They come off the hillside and go down and get water and stuff, but it's a pretty good spot in there. So I grab my stuff and I take off walking, and I was going to walk up, like I said, to the second landing and drop down, across the creek and go up to the trees right there and get in the blind. And at the last minute, I thought, it's dark enough. There was an intersection between the first landing and the second landing, and it went up the hill because we have some friends that got 2 cabins up there on the hill that we use and we have access to. We can go up there and camp, whatever. But so I thought, I'm just going to cut up this road right here a couple 100 yards and then cut in and come back down the creek. Once it's dark enough, I didn't want to scare any turkeys that were roosting in there. So So I did. And as I went up the road and I cut in, I was walking over to the creek. I got down into the creek and crossed it and came up the other side. And it was wet. It had been raining a lot. Super quiet going in there. Didn't make any sound at all. And I had just a little red pin light you could barely see the ground with walking in there, but I know the area really well. So anyway, I get down to my blind and I noticed that I can just barely see the ground at this point. I mean, it's just starting to get light enough where I can just see the ground. And I noticed that the top had been taken off the blind and it was laying right in front of the door where I couldn't open the door. Because the roof was laying there. And I was thinking, well, how did this happen? You know, I know the wind didn't do this. So why are all these laying here? So anyway, I can figure it out. So I just picked them all up and I put them back up there. I didn't need to, but I did. And I opened the door and I went in and I sat down and put my backpack on the left side and I put my shotgun on the right side. And I'm just sitting there waiting, you know, for it to get lighter and lighter out. Not really doing nothing, just sitting there. And anyway, it kind of turned into like a flat light situation, you know, where you can't tell. I don't know if you know what a flat light is, but it's where you can't really see depth or anything. And it's just kind of in between light and day. Well, that's kind of where I was at and all this right there. And so about another 10 minutes, 15 minutes go by. And I thought, well, you know, I'm just going to get my collars out and just get ready to go, you know. So I kept, you know how the forest kind of wakes up and you can hear birds chirping and everything going on. And I kept hearing noises and stuff, but I never really thought about it, you know, just kind of the forest waking up for the morning. But so anyway, I started to get my stuff out and then I really kept hearing something. And so I stopped and I'm listening. And I listened probably for about 5 minutes. And then I realized, wait a minute, that sounds like somebody talking. You know, like, have you ever had somebody talk that's like right on the edge of your hearing and you can hear it, but you can't quite make it out?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, that's what it sounded like. And I was looking around and it's getting lighter and lighter out. And I was just looking because I can see through the walls of this. It's just sticks laying up there. And there was little gaps in there. And I was looking out, you know, like, and the right-hand side of this blind was up against the tree. That's kind of what I mounted it to so it wouldn't fall over. So I'm just looking and looking. I even opened the back door and stuck my head out. Like, where is this coming from? But it wasn't constant talking. It would break up and then stop, you know, start, stop. So finally, I leaned forward and I put my head out the blind and I figured out that this talking was coming to the front of me and to the left. And now I need to kind of explain this meadow. This meadow was an L-shaped meadow. So it went out on the right-hand side. I was looking right at Mount Adams. It faced exactly west. I mean, and the right-hand side was about 60 yards long. The left-hand side was about 40. And then it turned to the left into a perfect L. And it went down about another 40 yards or so with about a 10-yard row of trees between the creek and that meadow. Yeah, and the turkeys would come off this hill. They'd roost up on the hillside and they'd come down and come across it and they would go down the creek and get water, whatever. And so anyway, I was thinking, there's somebody else in here. Well, how did somebody, because it's all private property. I've got the key to the gate and I'm 7 miles up the road. I'm about 6 miles up the road, somewhere in there, 5 to 6 miles. And then it's about 2 more miles up to the cabin. And then about a mile above that is the summit of the mountain. You can go over the other side. But so I was sitting there thinking, oh man, there's somebody else in here turkey hunting. Damn it. You know, this really pisses me off, you know? So I was getting pretty peeved about this whole thing. So matter of fact, I was getting ready to get out of the blind. I wasn't even going to take my shotgun with me. I was just going to walk over there and tell them, hey, y'all need to get out of here.
Yeah.
You're on private property. You don't need to be here. But the thing I couldn't figure out is I know nobody walked in here. The nearest house is 10 miles away. How did these guys get in here, you know? So just about the time I was going to get out of the blind, it's starting to get pretty light out at this point. From where I heard the talking, I could see something moving through the trees. And I thought, well, shoot, man, what is this? A hunter coming out or what's he doing? So I live in some pines and oak trees. It's kind of some low scrub stuff. It's not like the Gifford Pinchot where it's like a jungle in that freaking place, but it's a lot more open here where I'm at. But I was watching this thing coming across, and I thought, well, here comes a hunter out. I'll just wait for him to come out, and I'll just get out and go over there and tell him to get out of here, Well, when this thing came out of the trees, it was bent over at the waist, like a 90-degree bend, because there was some low scrub trees in there, and it bent over. And when this thing came out, it stood straight up, and it was about 2 feet out of the trees. And this is where my brain it took me a minute to figure out what I was looking at, because I was like, what is that? No, it's not a person. No, it's a ghillie suit. And then I thought, no. And then I thought, well, it's a bear. And no, it's not a bear. And then I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. And I thought, what in the F am I looking at here? And then it dawned on me. This is what my grandpas were talking about right here. This is a freaking Bigfoot, man. And it was about 7.5 foot tall. It was a big one. Yeah, it was a big guy here, man. I was like, holy shit. And I started to panic. I did. I reached for my shotgun, and I thought, no, don't grab your gun, man. Just stay here. I was starting to really panic, man, because I didn't have this even on my brain. I wasn't even expecting this. This just happened out of the blue. And I kept saying, just don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move. Just don't panic, don't panic. So this thing was looking north, and I was looking west. So I've got a full right side view of this thing, and it never moved. It never moved its head. It never moved its arms. It didn't do anything. It just stood there. And it was looking up on this hillside, and it did a sound. It said, it was like a murr, a real deep murr with a bird chirp on the end of it. It's like a murr chirp, murr chirp. I know I sound like an idiot doing this, but I can't do what it did.
Right.
So that's basically what it sounded like. It sounded like a murr with a bird chirp on the end of it. Real sharp, loud chirp. So it did it 3 times up on the hillside, and it stood there for about a minute. Then all of a sudden, it backed up slowly, and when it did, it bent over again. It went underneath this tree that it came out from, and I could see it moving through the trees. And it was gone for about, 2 minutes or so. And then I seen it movement again coming out, and it came out in the same spot, and it did the same thing. It ducked under this tree limbs and stuff, and it stood straight up, the same spot, about 2 feet out. And it did the same thing. It did that murr with a chirp on it 3 times. It was like a murr chirp, but it was loud. It wasn't like a yell. It was more of a projected yell.
Mm-hmm.
It did that murr with a chirp on it, and it looked up on the hillside. And it stood there for about another minute. And then all of a sudden, I didn't see the arm move. It flicked its wrist. I could see the wrist flick on it. Like, it just did a flick of the wrist a couple times. And then I looked over. I noticed another movement coming out. And I'm like, oh, God. Oh, shit. There's another one. And then I'm starting to really panic, man, because this one came out. It did the same thing as that one. It came under that same limb, but it didn't walk straight out. It was at a 45-degree angle from the one that was standing there. I think it just realized it didn't have enough room to stand there. So it turned and it walked over to the left shoulder of this one here. And it was looking more northwest, where this one was looking north and I was looking west. So this one, I'm watching this, and I was really panicking, man. I had like 18 scenarios go through my brain at one time, like what's going to happen now, what do you do? What are you going to do? So anyway, I got myself calmed down a little bit and just said, don't move. Just work through it. Just keep watching. I don't think they knew I was there. And I kind of got a theory of that. I'll tell you at the end, but so that one, I noticed, both of these looked black, but they looked gray. They were the same color. They looked black, but they were gray. And at the time, I didn't understand that. But about 5 months later, I figured this one out, I think. But they look black, but they look gray. And this one that came out was about a foot shorter than the first one. So it was about around 6.5 feet. I'm what, 6'2"? So I think this one was about 6.5 feet, and the first one was about 7.5 feet. But this one had 2 black stripes, one under its armpit and one on its hip. It was going around the back. So that one that was standing there kind of turned a little bit towards me, not a full 90 degrees like the first one, but it turned just a little bit. And then all of a sudden it turned just a little bit more towards me. And that one I could see was a female because I could see the right breast on it. And then as I'm watching them, I noticed that on this female, she had her hands in front of her, but like around her belly button. You know, I could just see the elbows, but I couldn't see the full hands. And then on her, I got to really look in, and right between her breasts, it looked like there was a head right there, where I could just see the last part of the head sticking out.
Yeah. And
I think it was an infant holding on to her under the armpits and with its legs going around her hips. That's the black stripes. I mean, I can't be 100% sure on that, but I'm about 98.5% sure that's what was happening. And she had her hands right in front of her, like it's holding its butt.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it had its arms around her, and it just had its head right between her boobs, I guess. But so anyway, they stood there for about a minute and a half or so. And then all of a sudden he huffed or grunted. He just went, ugh. And they both turned. Thank God they walked away from me. They headed west towards Mount Adams. And she fell right in behind him and followed him across that meadow.
Single file.
Yep, single file. It was like they were marching. It was like she was stepping in his foot tracks or something. That's what it looked like to me. And then they went up into the trees, and then I sat there for about 5 minutes. I was like, oh my God, it's time to get out of here. So I did. Matter of fact, when I opened the door, I stood out for a minute. I grabbed the shotgun and I stepped out the door because I was looking around, because I was like, man, it just seemed like he was calling for others. Like I think they were on a migration route back to the mountains, is what I think. But anyway, I was looking around for others. I kind of scanned the area pretty quick, and I grabbed my backpack and I moved out. I moved out with a hurry. I didn't run, but I mean, I moved out, man. I kept the blind between me and them as I went back up the hill, and I kind of retraced my steps out. And then, I went down across the creek, and I got my truck, and I hauled ass, man.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, this was not what I was expecting, man. Oh my God, it took me about 3 months to get over this one. I just couldn't get it off my brain, you know?
Yeah. Did you tell anybody?
No, I didn't. I never told anybody for 8 years. I never said nothing until May of 2023.
Wow.
Yeah, I never told. Well, I didn't know anything about, BFRO or any researchers or none of that. I just kept it to myself. I mean, all my grandpas, my dad and mom, they're all passed away now. I mean, I didn't really have anybody to tell this stuff to. So,
right.
And I just kept it to myself. But yeah, that was my firsthand encounter with, it scared the shit out of me, man. Yeah, I'm not sure what would have happened. I don't think they even knew I was there. What I think happened is I think they were coming down that creek, migrating back over into the Mount Adams area. I think we passed each other. I think they were coming down that creek when I was walking up that road, and I come in behind them.
Yeah. And
I think what happened was they happened to see that blind and went over there and pulled the top off that to look in there. Thank God I wasn't sitting in it. Yeah, I don't know what would have happened on that one, but I don't think it would have been good.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. And I mean, you're turkey hunting.
Yeah.
You got a shotgun loaded with turkey shot.
Yeah, I had 3-inch Magnum double-out buck in it.
Not an ideal situation, man.
No, it wasn't. No, especially when you're not expecting this to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, this was like the last thing I would have thought I'd have seen Santa Claus before this happened, but I don't know. It just worked out the way it worked out, I guess. But
about how far away from you were they?
About 45 yards. I know I said it was 40 yards to the corner, the shortest corner, but I was in the trees about 10 yards. So I'm thinking they were about 45 yards because they were right on that corner, right off of that corner is where they were. I mean, they weren't 5 yards off that corner. So,
and then whenever they crossed the pasture there.
Yeah, the meadow?
Yeah, the meadow. Was it just like a straight beeline to the other side?
Yep. They walked straight across it, right to the trees. They sure did. And they were heading somewhere. Luckily, it wasn't in my direction.
Yeah.
So
luckily, they were walking away, not towards.
Exactly. But, like I said, when I got out of the blind, I was kind of worried about running into other ones because they were obviously, he was hollering for somebody. I mean, he was looking for somebody. So.
And now is this an area that you went back to later on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Still active? Anything going on there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We've had 2 other encounters in there. Me and my son had an encounter in there in what was it? I got it wrote down. Yeah. July. It was either May or July of 2022. And then that year we were elk hunting in there in 22. We had another encounter. So one was with my son and one was with my daughter.
Wow.
Yeah. So as far as what I think happened is, I think they were walking down that creek and I was walking up. We were about 300 yards apart. And then I just came in behind him. And I think he pulled that top off looking in there and then figured out there was nothing in there and just threw him on the ground. And they were sitting down there in the trees and I walked right up on them, got in the blind. I don't think they even, I think they figured that their back was cleared.
Right.
So they weren't too worried about what was behind them. But yeah, I walked right up on them, man. I mean, one thing that really gets me was if I would have taken my original route, I was going to go from the first landing to the second landing and then drop down the creek and walk up. I would have walked right up in the face of them things in the dark. I would have walked straight up. Right where they were at was right where I was going to come through.
Wow.
So yeah, I kind of dodged a bullet on that.
I mean, there were a lot of random events that played in your favor.
I know. It was like the moon and the stars and the sun, everything lined up perfect for some reason.
Yeah. I don't know if the listeners are taking notes, but I mean, this is like a crazy, perfect storm scenario. I mean, you're turkey hunting the time of day, so you're not trying to, make any noise and disturb, roosting turkeys. The ground's wet, so you're not making a lot of noise. You came in from a different direction than you normally would.
Yeah. And then the wind was in my face. Like everything just worked out absolutely perfect. And for me, it was. I mean, I didn't want to. That scared the shit out of me, man. I don't know how perfect you could call that, but anyway.
I mean, could you make out any details of the hair patterns or the facial features or anything like that?
People have asked me that. I wasn't there for a fashion show, man. I was pretty scared, dude.
Right.
I wasn't right there kind of observing. I didn't see any ears. I don't remember the ears. They were probably there, but I just wasn't paying attention to that. They were silver, like on the back, on the arms, and on the chest, and some down the legs. The skin on their faces were flat black. Just flat black. I don't really recall the noses much.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really, neither one of them moved. They didn't. Yeah, they never looked around. They just came out and just stood there looking on that. I don't know what was so important about that hillside, but I think they were on a migration route back, and I think they travel in small groups. I don't think they travel in big groups. They just have probably rendezvous points somewhere that they meet up once they get to where they're going. I mean, a larger group would probably be seen more than the smaller groups. I don't know, man. It makes sense to me to break up into small groups and then move forward.
You said something. So the male comes out the first time and does the mer chirp, and then you said it backed up back into the trees. Are you saying it just walked backwards and bent over and kept going backwards, still facing forward the whole time?
No, I think, when I watched it back up into the trees, it did. It was facing up the hill. It was facing north and it backed up. And then it just bent over and then backed up into the trees. And I think it stood up and turned around and walked over to where the other one was.
Yeah.
I can't confirm that. All I could see was just movement going through the trees. And then all of a sudden it came back out and did the same thing and just bent over.
It's interesting because if you think about a person, how we move, we're going to, like, you typically turn around and walk back in.
Right.
Unless there's something going on. And the behavior and everything, my mind's just taking me to a place where something, again, it's another situation where there's a piece that's missing here.
Right.
Why this thing was kind of guarded,
Well, I think when they're out in the open, I think it was, I don't know. To me, it just seemed like it was trying to keep the movement to a minimum. Like it just slowly backed up and bent over. And then once it got inside the trees, it probably turned around and walked normally then. But
right.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you on that one. I have no idea.
But I mean, it sounds like it, like you were saying, it was calling to another one to locate another one, but didn't get a response or something.
That's what I think happened. I don't think there was any in the area. Thank God. I can just imagine some more of them popping out.
Yeah, merch up right behind
God dang, man. Dude, I'd have been sucking my thumb at the bottom of that freaking blind, man.
I want to take a break here for a minute to tell you guys about something. I've never done this before, but I always told myself that if I ran across something I felt strongly enough about, I would tell everyone about it. And I want to tell you about incogni.com. I know a lot of you, including myself, are seeing more and more scams out there. I get spam emails, phone calls, even messages on social media all the time from people trying to scam me. Each episode, I put my email address out there for people to use it if they want to share their story. And of course, this leads to me getting a box full of spam. But it's not just me. There are companies out there that collect and sell your data, your personal information, and you aren't even aware of it. I know they do this because I've recently had it happen to me. I consider myself a pretty safe guy when it comes to the internet and who I give my information to, but that didn't stop data brokers from selling my personal information. But Incogni can help you, just like it has me, to end those robocalls and scam letters by cutting it off at the source. Not only does Incogni track down who has your personal information, but they also do all the work and remove it for you, all with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code Bigfoot at the link in the description and get 60% off an annual plan. All right, back to business. What happened to get you involved in the Bigfoot world? Because, I mean, that's how I know you, is through other Bigfooters and people involved in the Bigfoot world.
Well, that's it. My grandpa's talking about that, and then all of a sudden, I had this situation. What really got me into the Bigfoot world is me and my wife, we own 10 acres. We live on a little river, about 15 miles east of where I had this sighting. And it's not a big river. It's not a small river. You probably wade across it in the summertime, but wintertime, you wouldn't want to do that. It's raging. But so in 2018, I came home from work one day, and my wife was all freaked out. She said, "You're not going to believe what happened today." And I said, "What happened?" She said, "I seen a Bigfoot." And I said, "What? Where?" She goes, "Out on the back, in the back pasture out there."
On your property?
On our property. And I'm like, "What?" I'm kind of skeptical. Like, "Are you sure about this?" And then she kind of got mad. And she goes, "Yes, I'm telling you. I'm going to show you where it was at." Well, she was homesick that day. So she had got up to get something to drink, and she was going to go back to bed. As she was going back to bed, she looked out the dining room window. She seen this thing walk out. She said it was like a light brown. So our back fence, there's about a 30-foot section from the fence to a row of trees right there. And right on the other side of that row of trees is the river. This thing had walked out through that row of trees and walked between the trees and the fence line for about 100 yards, and it kind of drops down over the hill, back down into the river. And she said, "I watched this thing walk out and walk up that fence line," and he said it was just like on a stroll. It was just walking along, arm swinging. And I said, what did you do? She goes, I went and closed the blinds and I went and jumped in bed and put the covers over my head. And I'm like, what's that going to do for you? You know? She goes, I don't know, but it made me feel safe.
It's going to make the boogeyman go away. That's what it's going to do. We all know what it's going to do.
I'm like, okay, you know. I said, were the doors locked? Oh, yeah, doors are locked. I'm like, I don't think jumping in bed, putting covers over your head is going to help. But anyway, I got a good laugh at it. So I did. I went out there and I looked, and sure enough, you could see where something had walked down through the grass. I mean, there was no tracks or anything. I mean, you couldn't make out footprints, but you could see where something actually walked out of the trees and walked down through there for about 100 yards. You can see where it went down into the river again. So I was like, huh. And then I got back and I'm like, well, you can see, you know, I told her, I said, you can definitely see where something walked through there. I mean, there's no definitive tracks or anything, but you can see where it smashed the grass down and stuff. And she's like, well, it almost seems like you believe me. And I was like, yeah, I do. Well, I hadn't told her anything yet about my encounter. I almost told her then. I thought, no, you better not. I'll just keep to myself. So anyway, that was her sighting. Let's see, July. We were back up in the same area. It was either May or July of 2022. My son he was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, and he had come home for the weekend. And so he'd brought a couple Army buddies with him. And the landowner's son that owns the cabins that I was telling you about earlier, that's about 2 miles above where I seen the ones I seen. And I think I sent a picture of that with some thumb drops around the cabin. Yeah, I showed that. Yeah, I sent that to you. But so anyway, he wanted me to come up and we were going to spend the weekend up there. So I said, all right, I'll go. But I didn't get up there until about 9:30. It was just starting to get dark. I went to the gate, got up to the second gate, went through that and got up to the cabin. But there's that creek I was telling you about that I crossed over. You got to drive across that creek. And as soon as you do, you take the right and the cabin's about 40 yards up the hill right there. It's right on the creek. And so I had gotten there and the boys, they were up there partying. They were having a good time playing music and stuff. And I had just bought a couple of AGM Rattler 640s, thermals. And anyway, the landowner's son, I'll call him Cal. Cal had he just bought a high-end Nod. It's an IR Nod. It was actually pretty good. But so anyway, we get there, and so the boys, they wanted to mess around with the thermals and stuff. And I said, all right, here, you know, so we put batteries in them, and they're down there. They went back down the hill to where the creek was. And like I said, you got to cross the creek and then head down. But they were on this side of the creek and they were looking through the thermals and everything. They had the rifles with them and stuff. And anyway, I was in there I think this was May, because I was trying to get a fire going in the cabin, kind of warm it up, because we're like 6,000 feet, 5,000 to 6,000 feet. It still, even in the summertime, it gets cold up there. So I was trying to get a fire going, and all of a sudden the freaking door busts open, and here comes my son and Cal in there, and they're freaked out. And I'm like, well, they scared the hell out of me. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And my son's like, Dad, man, there's something down there barking at us like a dog, but it doesn't sound like a dog. It's too deep. I'm like, what do you mean a dog? You know, there are no dogs around here. And then Cal goes, no, then it growled at us, man. It was like a real deep, low growl. And I was like, oh God. Well, I hadn't told my son, I hadn't told anybody about this yet. I told the boys, I said, here, I had my shotgun, but it's not a hunting shotgun. It's more of a home ride, whole 7 rounds. So I had it with me, and I grabbed that. And I said, give me one of them thermals and give me the light. So I said, you boys just stay up here in the cabin. Now I'm going to go down and look around. So I did. I went down there and to the creek, and I was looking around, and I crossed the creek, and on the east side of that creek, there's another row of trees right there. And then I crossed the creek and I went up on the other side of those trees, and I walked up to about where the cabin was on the other side. And I didn't see anything. And I just went back down, across the creek, and came back up. And I said, well, whatever it is, it's gone. I don't see it out here at all. So anyway, they were kind of calming down. They were like, dude, that wasn't normal. And I'm like, well, I don't know what it was. I already had an idea what it was, but I didn't want to tell them.
Right.
So I said, I don't know what it is. It's already gone. Just leave it alone. So Anyway, on the back side of this cabin, on the creek side, there's a porch there. It's about 10 foot off the ground. And then the creek goes across there. And then there's a bank right there on the other side. And anyway, the boys decided they wanted to do some shooting. This is probably 10:30 at night. And, like I said, we're 10 miles from nobody's. Nobody's going to hear us. So anyway, they got their rifles and pistols out, and they were shooting into the bank on the other side of the creek, just horsing around. And so they shot for 15, 20 minutes and got done with that. And they went back inside, and they had the music going. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to go down and pick up some casings because I like to reload all my stuff. So and the only way to get out of that cabin is go through the front door, and you got to go all the way around. And I was down there on the creek, and I was picking up shell casings and stuff, and for about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, off to our east, oh my God, man. I've never heard one of these things roar before, but man, when this thing roared, oh my God, you talk about shaking the ground, shaking your lungs. This thing roared. And I mean, I stood up immediately and faced that direction. And I said, what in the hell is that? Because this thing, he had a set of lungs on him, man. And I was like, oh shit. And I took off running and went back into the cabin. Well, the boys didn't really hear it. I told them, hey, shut that music off for a minute. Something just yelled at us, man. And so we sat there for about 10 minutes listening, and nothing happened. We were out on the porch kind of listening, and nothing happened. That was off to the east side. So I thought, well, shoot, maybe it's gone. I don't know. So anyway, I went back out. I said, well, these guys do whatever you got to do. And they turned the music back on. They're partying or doing whatever they're doing. And I went back out, and I was picking up more brass. And this time, about another 10 minutes went by or so. This thing had moved from the east side, and it was up on the hill to the north side, and it screamed at us again, but it was closer this time. And it seemed like it was more intense. So I go take off running back into the cabin, and well, they heard at that time. They're like, what was that? And I said, that's whatever that is screaming at us. It's just did it to the north side of us here. And they're like, wow, man, that's pretty loud. And I was like, yeah. So anyway, the gun started coming out and getting loaded up. And so we sat there for about 10 minutes, and nothing happened. And so I thought, well, I wasn't going to go back out and pick up ammo or brass anymore. I was done with that one. I was like, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I'm pretty much done with that. So I was sitting out on the front porch, just standing there, just kind of looking around. And all of a sudden, it had crossed and came down to the east side of us. And there's an old, they did some logging in there and thinning. So there's a great big brush pile. It's about the size of a house. It's about 100 yards from the cabin. And then there's a creek about 50 yards past that, another creek that comes down right there. This thing let out, man. This one was even closer. This thing, it rattled the freaking doorknobs on this one, man. Anyway, the boys come running out, and they're like, what is that? I mean, this thing hadn't even stopped screaming yet. And I said, just get back in the cabin. Let's just get back in here and stay there. It had got done yelling. It kind of made me mad, dude. I was like, because it just seemed like it was getting closer and more intense, like it was just like you could just feel like something was about to happen. So I went in there and told the boys, I said, hey, I'm going out there to find this thing. I grabbed my shotgun and a flashlight and a thermal. And I said, I'm going out to find this thing, man. And I said, who's going with me? Well, my son and one of his army buddies said, I'll go with you. But the other two wouldn't leave the cabin. They're like, no, we're not going out there. So as we went flying out the door, my son asked me, he goes, where was it? I said, I think it's between that slash pile and the creek. So it's about 100 yards out. So we kind of went down the hill, and we were kind of taking the road up there, looking around everywhere. And we got within about 75 yards, or well, within about 25 yards of the slash pile. And my son started getting scared. So did his buddy. They're like, what are we going to do? I said, well, if it taxes, we're going to kill it. And I don't care. We're going to shoot it. So anyway, they started getting scared, and they're like, dude, we're not going any further. And I was like, come on, let's just go up here. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. No, we're heading back to cabin. So I was like, well, I don't want to be out here by myself,
right.
Freaking, a bunch of army guys out here, and they're all scared. What the hell, What's going on here? So anyway, yeah, we turned around and went back. And anyway, we didn't have any more problems, but we slept with our rifles that night. I told them, you guys better keep these close, man, because I don't know what's going to happen. But so anyway, they kept asking me, what do you think it is? And I said, I don't know. I knew what it was, but I just didn't want to say anything. And then Cal, the landowner's son, goes, oh, it's a Bigfoot. They're around here. And I'm just looking at him like, he goes, yeah, I believe in them. They're around here. And I'm like, do you think that might have been good information to tell us about 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have shared that, So anyway, that was our encounter with my son and the landowner's son. So
what do you think was setting it off that night? The gunfire or what?
I do. I think what happened was, now that I kind of got into the BFRO and started going on these expeditions, I'm starting to kind of understand this more and more. But back then I would have killed it. I would have shot it, man. We would have unloaded on it. But nowadays I wouldn't do that. I mean, that's their place. And, I guess education goes a long ways, once you kind of start understanding these things. But I think what happened is when they went, it was watching us from the creek down there at the intersection. And I think when the boys went down there, started barking at them like a dog to try to get them to go away.
Yeah.
Well, when that didn't work and they started getting closer, trying to figure out what it was, then it growled at them. Well, that worked because they took off running back to the cabin after that. I think this thing had walked up the creek and was on the east side of the cabin, right where the boys were shooting into the bank. I think it was up there on that bank. And when they started cutting loose with guns and stuff, I think that pretty much made it mad,
Yeah. That seems to be kind of a common denominator in aggressive situations. Gunfire tends to escalate things rather quickly.
Yeah, and it did too. Things started stepping up pretty quick. But I think actually running out of the cabin, all three of us, and kind of doing a little show of force, I think I realized that, hey, they're not messing around either.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't the smartest thing I ever did, but I think it actually kind of helped to kind of de-escalate things because it was probably watching us the whole time and it realized, hey, they got guns and they're not messing around either. So it's going to be one or something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but we never had another problem that night,
And then what happened with your daughter?
Yeah, this happened that October. About 4 months later, we were up in the same area at the cabins and we were elk hunting, but we were further up on the mountain there. There's a valley that goes down through there and the elk like to run up and down that. It's like their migration route for the elk right in there. So I had an elderly guy. He'd retired a few months after we went elk hunting, but he wasn't in the best of shape, but he was a coworker. He wanted to go out elk hunting. I said, yeah, let's go. And I took my daughter with me. We were up on the ridge and looking down into this valley. And it had a forest fire come through there some years back. So it was pretty bad in there. It was a lot of deadfall and, it was just hard getting through there. So I put my daughter on the ridge and I took my coworker down about 100 yards and I put him on a stand and I walked back to my daughter and I said, hey, I'm going to go down in this valley and see if I can't get them elk to, they just run back and forth through that valley right there. So I was talking to my daughter and about 50 yards behind her, it was wide open. And then there was some more trees right in there. And right inside the tree line, I think they were in there hunting too. I think there was some Bigfoot in there hunting because, man, there was 3 tree knocks. It sounded like lightning or thunder going off when it hit that 3 times, man. It was so loud. My daughter goes, what was that? And I said, I think it's just, and I was looking over her right shoulder, looking back there at the trees. And I said, it's just a limb falling out of a tree. And she goes, damn, that must be one big limb. I said, yeah, I think it was. So anyway, I just kind of was like, I don't know if this is I don't want to leave my daughter and an elderly guy out here by themselves. So I got a hold of my friend. I said, hey, come back here. So I just told my daughter and him, let's just leave the area. Let's just get out of here. we'll go in another direction, which we did. So I think they were in there hunting too. So they just let us know, like, hey, get out of here. You know, I mean, you're only going to get so many warnings. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we did. We just got out of there and went back down the mountain and hunted in another direction. But yeah, I think they were just telling us, hey, we're here. We're hunting. Get out of here. So that's what we did.
Since you started, going out with BFRO members and different people and stuff, have you had any sightings since then?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we had a sighting. Matter of fact, that first one that me and my wife signed up for, we ended up between Forks and Port Angeles up there. And yeah, it was up there at the Olympic Project, in fact. So we were camped there. I was with I was on Scott Taylor's team. There was 10 of us that went out the first night. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of what happened on this one. But they set out different teams. They were going different directions. And I said, well, which one has the most sightings? And they said, well, the Swamp Trail has the most. And I said, well, that's one I want to go on. And I don't know why I do that stuff. But anyway, so I was on Scott Taylor's team. And I was, out of 10 people, I was the 8th one in line. And I've got this Army helmet that I bought. And I've got an AG, what is it? It's a Sting. It's an AGM Sting IR 384. So I mounted it to a bridge on there. So I'm 100% thermal all the time. So when I'm walking along, I'm looking through thermal. So I was the 8th person in line. The 2 guys behind me didn't have thermals. The guy in front of me, he was from Texas. He had a thermal. And then of course, Scott Taylor, he was leading the group. So he's the first guy. He had a thermal. So we walked down through this, the swamp area. There's a trail down through there. And we got down at the end of the road. It's about a mile down there. And the trail continues on across the road. But this road, we turned on the road and took a right. And it kind of backtracks uphill about a 45-degree angle to the trail. So as we were walking back up this road, I was looking over the side of the road. And I could see something coming down the trail. I could see a thermal hit once in a while of something coming down the trail. And I thought it was somebody late to the party trying to catch up. But there was about a 50-foot section of trees there that was wide open. And the brush was about 4 feet off the ground or so. So anyway, as I'm sitting there watching this, coming through the trees, I could see more and more. And as all of a sudden it walked out, it was walking down the trail. Just like we walked down the trail. I could see its legs and arms moving. And then I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. They say never say anything and never point at them. Well, when this thing walked out, I said, holy shit, there's one right there. And I pointed at it. And I know and I was backing up. I was actually pulling my pistol out. It freaked me out that much. You always say you're ready to see these things, but man, when you do. So anyway, the guy behind me, I about ran him over, backing up, and then he kind of caught me, and I kind of come back and said, all right, calm down. Well, as soon as I said that, this thing stopped. It just froze. I mean, it locked itself up in the trail. So the guy in front of me, he had a thermal. He was standing there looking at it too. And the 2 guys behind me, they were going, what's it doing? And I said, it's just standing there looking down the trail. It's frozen. It's not moving. And then all of a sudden it started moving really, really slow towards us. I mean, like super slow. It just started turning its whole body. And I was telling the guys behind me, I said, dude, it's turning. It's turning its body looking at us. So we were trying to get Scott Taylor's attention, and we finally got him down there, and he was looking at it on his too. But by the time he got down there, when it turned and was looking at us, it all of a sudden it started squatting down. And I was telling the guys there, I said, hey man, it's squatting down. It's going really slow. It squatted down really slow until it got down behind those bushes. And then it started doing the old peekaboo with its head. It did it about 20 times.
Yeah.
It would just look up at us and go down, look up and go down. And then it moved over to its left, our right, in behind some trees, and you could see it peeking around the trees. And then all of a sudden it laid down on the ground and it crawled off to the right of us. So which was kind of wild. I never. The next day, Scott Taylor kind of briefed us and said it spider crawled away. I never heard that before, but I didn't say anything about it laying on the ground, because when he said that, I was like, dude, you just confirmed what I seen. It looked like it laid down and crawled off to me.
Yeah.
Well, that night we all got back to camp. All the teams got back, and off to our north side of the camp there, we started hearing tree breaks and stuff. Like something just grabbed a 2x4 and broke it in half. That's how loud this stuff was. So the next day, some of the researchers went out there to hang up cameras. Well, they found a 15-footstep trackway. And they were 15 inches long and 7 inches wide, and they casted. There was either 12 or 15, and they casted 6 or 8 of them. Yeah, it was interesting, man.
Since you guys had thermals going, you guys, I assume, were going lights out.
Oh, yeah. It was 100% lights out. Yeah. We were completely dark.
If anybody's questioning the behavior of this thing in its mind, you can't see it. It doesn't realize that you guys can even see it.
Right. Yeah, if I hadn't said anything, it would have walked right on by. But as soon as I said, holy shit, there's one right there, it just immediately stopped, and then it faced us.
Yeah, there was a situation down in Texas. I've talked about it on the show in the past, whenever my friend went with me and had his life-changing experience. And that was one of the craziest nights of my life. But I observed one doing the peekaboo thing for about 5 to 10 minutes that night. And it's weird, man. It's weird how they do that. This one was just kind of behind a bush, and you would just see it like pop its head up above the bush, and you'd like look over there or try to catch it with a light of some kind, and it would just duck back down, and it just kept doing it over and over and over. And then it just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, that's what this one did too. Matter of fact, it did it so much that even Scott Taylor was like, oh, it's heads up. Now it's down. It's heads up. It's down. It's up. It's down. It just kept doing that until it just finally, I don't know, got tired and crawled off, I guess. So anyway, I'm pretty sure that was the one that we got the foot tracks off of the next morning. They came into our camp that night. So it just kind of followed us back up there is all it did. Last year, we were over on the west side of Mount Adams, and I have a thermal drone. I've always been into flying drones and stuff. We had our East team take off, and I flew out around them, and nothing really happened. But I was down to about 10 minutes of battery time on them, and our South team called in and said they were starting to have activity, and they were right behind us. I was facing north, but so I was flying back with that thermal drone, and I noticed right above our camp, there's 3 meadows right there in a row. I noticed two figures standing just in the tree line. And I thought it was our South team. But as I got closer, they took off walking, and I wasn't recording. Oh, man, I want to kick myself in the face for this one, but I started, well, they walked out in the middle, and as I come up on them with that drone, they stopped. And then they started squatting down. Then I realized one was bigger than the other. So, yeah. So I ended up getting about 5 minutes of video off of these. But it appears to be a female holding an infant with a juvenile just to her right side. I think I sent you that picture.
Yeah. And then you sent me the follow-up with the, I think it was Scott Taylor standing there for a size comparison.
Yeah.
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 Nowhere close to the same size.
No, he's about the size of the juvenile. I think the juvenile might be, Scott's 5'6". I think the juvenile may be a little bit bigger than him. It may be the same height, but the mass wise is just a lot bigger, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
But the female, we're thinking that she was probably about 8 foot size range, because, well, the next day Scott went up there and we did a recreation of that. I flew the drone over and I took a picture, and you have that picture too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we found that footprint. Yeah, that footprint was from that female. It's a left footprint, and you can clearly see all the toes. You can see everything in that one.
Yeah.
So I have 2 or 3 pictures of the juvenile. It was either 7 or 8 inches long on the juvenile foot tracks that we found too. So
where is your head at with what these things are at this point?
I have thought about that and thought about it, and I don't know. I don't know, because the ones I seen, the first ones I seen, they didn't have a cone head. I keep hearing reports of, oh, this thing had especially down in the South, like to where you guys are at.
Yeah.
They say that they have coned heads, but the ones I seen didn't have any coned heads at all on them. They just look like a round head to me.
I mean, the things that I've seen didn't have a cone head. And I was like you. I had always heard that, you know, they have this huge sagittal crest, and like what I saw didn't have that.
No, mine, yeah, the daylight sightings I've seen, even on our thermals, it didn't seem like they had a coned head either. So even that picture I sent you, it looks like it has a round head on it.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know if it's maybe just a thing with males that develop later in life, or if it's maybe there's different kinds or something. I don't know, man. What I saw didn't look anything like in the movies or the pictures or anything like that.
Right.
I've seen very few artist interpretations that get anywhere close to what I saw.
I've only seen one drawing from a guy out of Idaho that had a sighting. I seen mine on the right-hand side. He's seen his on the left-hand side. But that drawing, matter of fact, next time I see him, I'm going to get a picture of that, because that is absolutely perfect of what I seen the first time. It just fit everything. It's the closest that I've ever seen as far as the drawing goes. I don't know. I've thought about that. I've had people ask me about that. What do you think? You know, and I don't know. I just don't think there's that many of them around. I think they're just few and far between, and they're just chance encounters with these things, you know.
Do you think they're flesh and blood, or do you think there's paranormal aspects to them?
I've never seen any paranormal, but I've heard people talk about cloaking and orbs and flying spaceships. I've never seen that. So, you know, until I do, to me, they're flesh and blood. You're not going to convince me otherwise. I don't think these things fly spaceships or float around as an orb, but I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't. Until I see it, I'm just going to go with what I seen.
I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of stories. I've talked to people that I completely believe and trust that have, you know, witnessed some extraordinary things. But me personally, I never saw any of it.
Yeah, I haven't either. You know, and I've had people tell me, oh, I've hunted this area for 40 years. Well, you know what? So did I until that day. You know, there you go. So just take it for what it's worth, man.
And if you've had an encounter with Bigfoot or something else you can't explain and you'd like to share your story, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.